Hey free-to-play gang, welcome back to another video. Okay, so it has actually been 3 whole months since we last did our tier list, and this is in 3.1.8. So a lot of things have changed. My opinion about some of the aspects have changed as well. And of course, I have the regret tier list here, which I'm not sure whether any of you guys actually saw because I forgot to pin it. But this is the previous tier list, and there are some changes to be made, definitely. Some major changes. And one of the biggest changes that I am going to do is I'm actually going to increase the number of tiering over here. So previously we had S, A, B, and C, and afterwards that's about it. We only had 4 different tiering. But right now I feel like we need 5 different tiering just because there are some aspers that truly do not sit together with the other aspers, and I'm referring to the S tier list over here. There are some aspers over here that clearly strives above and beyond the rest. Okay, so for this tier list, there are some things that I must say at the start so that I warn you guys about what this tier list is all about. So number one, obviously this is going to be an R2 tier list. I feel like it is still very viable for most free-to-play players to try to achieve some of these aspers that are in R2. So we're not going to be discussing their R3, R4, R5, R6. That is not important at all for this conversation. We want to focus more on this asper at its current R2 state. How good and how versatile and how viable is it for all content in this game, which is my second point. So this tier list is going to cover every single content in this game. It's not particularly going to be focused on PvE. It's not going to be particularly focused on PvP. It's going to give you guys an idea based on my experience how each of these aspers perform right now, which brings me to my third point, which is this whole tier list is entirely based on my own experience and my own opinions only. So take it with a grain of salt. Now the thing is, if you are at the end game, then aspers who are in the niche tier might still be extremely good for you because these aspers do cover some of the niche grounds that you already need because you can cover every other content in the game. So this tier list is not going to tell you which asper is trash, which asper is extremely broken. This tier list is going to give you an idea of whether this asper that you might have is versatile or not. So that is the entire basis for the conversation for today's video. So everything that I say, please take it with a grain of salt. This is not me refereeing or being a mediator to your fight with your mother as to which asper is stronger than which asper. We're just trying to have a civil conversation over here, and I'm just trying to push forward my opinion about some of these aspers because I have used a lot of them in a lot of different content, and I have my own opinions about some of these aspers, which may differ from yours, which is totally okay. So if you disagree, feel free to let me know down in the comment section below so that everyone else can understand where you're coming from and we can have a proper discussion and we can learn from each other as well. So without further ado, let's start. Now, the first asper in our conversation is going to be Abigail. So she covers a lot of ground right now just because of the effectiveness of her skill kit. So not only are her skills good, her AI is smart as well. She tends to target the leader or whoever has the lowest HP, which makes a lot of sense because her third skill actually provides your asper with a life-stealing effect, which allows that asper to heal himself. And of course, her AI is smart enough to revive your allies so that your allies can respawn with 100% AP and deal all the damage that it needs to do and heal that asper up as well. So yeah, her kit is very strong, very viable in many different content in the game, PvE, PvP, a lot of stuff. She's excellent. I feel like she is going to be the first S+ asper over here. Now, take note that we are not going to go very deep into each of these aspers because there's just way too many, and I do not want to talk for like 2 hours straight. So next asper, we're going to talk about Ahmed. In my opinion, he's mostly good for endgame content like PvP and in Fafnir, and that is mostly it. He's not going to excel very much in a lot of different PvE content, but he is still very powerful. The only issue in my opinion is that he's very much replaceable. So even at R2, where he starts to give your team a speed boost whenever he starts healing your allies, like so, right? Each supporting song grants 2 speed. I don't feel like it's going to be that effective aside from tanky point war. It's probably not going to be very important in other content. So because of that, I think I'm just going to put him in S tier, and that is all. Now next up we have Ashley. She's very good in a lot of content, but mostly in the endgame focus. So if you want to speedrun Ritual Miracles, for example, she excels in that content. If you want to do very well in point, in like PvP or point war, RTA, knockout, she's going to excel in that content. But for the most part, she is only going to cover grounds where new players might not be interested in. She's more of like a bonus at the end game where she starts to cover many of your weaknesses or to speed up your runs and all that kind of stuff. So she's still versatile in that sense, but not truly versatile. So I am going to put her at S tier. Now next up we have Biondina. This is obviously going to be a C tier asper. There is only 2 places where she excels in truly. First is Holo Battles, second is the Dark Star Lord. Now Brewster at R2 is amazingly powerful because right now he starts off with his buff whenever he begins the wave, right? So over here. Now because of that, that completely changes his kit. So instead of needing to run speed at the start, you now no longer need speed at all. You can just rely fully on DPS and allow your allies to push you forward because whenever he assists attacks, he actually gains AP as well. So this completely changes the way he's built, and this further pushes his DPS output by a lot. So he's very viable in PvP, he's very viable in a lot of PvE content. He is very, very, very strong. So I think he's actually one of the better S tier Espers right now. He is not S plus because he is, after all, just a DPS Esper with defense break. And he doesn't have a crazy kit as compared to some of the other S plus tier Espers, I would think. Now next up we have Camille, and she has a double nuke at R6, but we're not going to talk too much about R6, although we should probably think about her as an R6 Esper as well. So at R2, her second skill does a little bit more damage, which is decent for her usefulness because all she really is just a double AoE nuker. So I think in terms of clearing content, she's mostly either going to be in point war, knockout, or tower content. And that is basically it. So I think she's going to be sitting very nicely in A tier right now. Now next up we have Cang Ji. He's going to go straight into, I think, C tier, okay, maybe B tier, B tier. Okay, and the reason for that is he excels truly in PvP content. He excels in maybe holo battles, in point war, in knockout, in RTA. I think all PvP content is where he shines in the most. And the difference that he has at R2 versus at R0 is essentially just he now swaps the HP instead of just mirroring the HP of his third skill. But that is very strong because now not only are you reducing the enemy's max HP, you are also nuking them afterwards, which could potentially kill off that one enemy like that. Now Cecilia is going to be an obvious C tier. Unless she's at R6, she's always going to belong to C tier. Now as for Clara, you guys already expected this. She's going to go into S+. I really like using her even at this current point. Even at the end game, I still have a lot of room for use for her. So only until recently where I changed my APAP lineup, she has been my 8 memo chips blitz team trump card. Like, she made my runs 100% safe, and it was super easy to blitz my runs because I included her into my team. But aside from just APAP, she's also really good in temporal tower content. I use her for speed running the temporal tower, just to give me the AP push and the immunity as well. But most importantly, she gains 2 turns of immunity on her third skill at R2. And why this is so strong is that right now, after she pushes your team's AP, your team takes a turn, your team no longer loses the immunity buff that they have. Now they still have 1 more turn of immunity, which is very important. So she's very viable in many different content, and that's why I feel like she is going to sit very nicely in S+. Now next up we have Donar. He is obviously going to go into C tier. I don't feel like there is a lot of use for him. I do see him in point war, but aside from point war, that is all that I really see use in him. But even in point war, I don't find that he's that viable either. I've never had any issues whatsoever dealing with a Donar. Now next up we have Elaine, and she strives in 2 main content, or rather 3 main content. The first is obviously going to be Fafnir, the second is going to be Furbutter, and the third is going to be Dark Star Lord. And she's really good in all these 3 content, like extremely good. So I'm going to put her at B tier. She is not the worst, she is not super niche. She's still very viable in some content. Now next we have Embla, and her R2 makes her a tremendous powerhouse. So at R0, she's not going to be able to AoE attack, but at R2 and above, she's going to be able to AoE after exploding her Corrupted Seed effect over here. So she automatically becomes really good in Calamity Island, she automatically becomes really good in Infinity Tower. She's also really viable in PvP content, so long as you have the exact speed tuning and the right setup. And she's generally very useful in a lot of PvE content, including APAP as well. I feel like she deserves the S tier, and it is clear as day. Now next up we have Ethan, and I do feel like he is very powerful. Now, a lot of people are going to say that he's probably a PvP Esper. I kind of beg to differ. In my opinion, I feel like Ethan is really good in PvE content, especially at R2, because he starts off with his defense break right now, and he also starts off with his panic gaze, which means the enemies are subject to cooldown reductions, or cooldown extensions I should say. So not only are you going to provide your team with extra speed, extra crit damage, extra crit rate, which makes your team easier to build, he also defense breaks the enemies, and he also has control on his kit, which makes him very powerful, even for like the temporal tower and all that. So I do feel like he is an S tier Esper at R2, that is for sure. Now as for Everett, he strives mostly in all PvP content, that is all. As for the Fatum sisters, they have found more usefulness nowadays because like the addition of the other 2 Sentinel Hunt bosses. So she has some viability in that regard, and she's also quite useful in a Calamity Island, mostly focused on PvE content. So I'm actually going to put her at A tier. I feel like she is good to have, but she is very expensive to skill up because she is after all just a extremely glorified Ira. I mean, they do very different things, but in terms of like AP control, they kind of share a lot of similarities. But yeah, just understand that they are 2 very different Espers. Now, next up, Nuxi. This is one of the reasons why I feel like the S plus tier needs to exist. So Nuxi at R2, believe it or not, she starts stealing buffs on her first skill. I think a lot of people tend to forget about this fact. So at R2, when she normal attacks and she has Paper Talisman, she's actually going to steal 1 buff from each enemy, and she can steal up to 5 buffs because she can AoE attack with her first skill. Insane. But of course on top of that, she's just broken in PvE and PvP content. I use her everywhere. Now moving on, we have Gabrielle, and she is very viable in a lot of PvE content and in PvP as well. She covers a lot of ground. She is definitely one of the most versatile Espers in this game right now. And at R2, she only gains a little bit of DPS based on her speed, which is not much. So that's not going to change a lot for her. But the thing is, her natural form itself is so versatile that it makes her a really good Esper to have. So I think most people can agree that she still exists in the S+ tier. She is completely unmatched in terms of like her immunity, her defense buff, her defense breaks, her attack debuff. There is a lot jam-packed into her kit, and she's also a very powerful damage dealer as well. Now, Gaius, clearly S+ tier. There is very little Esper that can match up to him in terms of his DPS output and in terms of his utility as well. There is a lot jam-packed into his kit. Maybe even if we talk about how easy it is to build him, he's very, very easy to build. You don't need crit rate, you just need crit damage, you just need attack, and maybe some speed. That is all. And he becomes tremendously powerful because he is the best version of himself in the human form and the god form as well. Now next we have Ife, and I know you guys are instantly going to agree that she's going to go straight into C tier. She's probably only going to be good in the Calamity Island, and that's about it. She's not going to be good in any other content. Not even in PvP, don't fight me on this. Okay, next we have Intisa, and she does get a pretty good upgrade on her R2. Let's take a look. Now at R2, she's actually able to cycle her third skill much easier. So when she loses her stealth because she uses her attacks, when she uses her first skill without stealth, she's actually going to go straight into her third skill, which reapplies stealth again. So her cycling is a lot better. I think she becomes like 25% more efficient or 33% more efficient that way, which is a good thing for her. Now, in terms of content coverage, she only covers a few content. It's mostly going to be Chronos, and aside from Chronos, maybe Dark Starlord. That is a big maybe, only if you really need her in that regard, or like you're missing certain other better Espers. So, in terms of general viability, I am actually not feeling it for Intisa right now. I feel like she is probably a B tier Esper, but do take note that we're only talking about R2, we're not talking about her R6, where she actually attack up buff your entire team. That is a very different upgrade for her kit. But hey, my opinion has not shifted since the last time as well. Very nice. Okay, next up we have Jiang Tuoli. I am going to lower him from S tier to A tier. I don't feel like he has... I have to be honest with myself, I don't feel like he's an S tier Esper at all. He is really good in PvP, that is true. And he's an auto win condition in whole battles or in point war if you're using him as your offense unit. But in defense, he is highly countered and very easy to deal with anyway. So I feel like he is probably going to be an A tier Esper if we talk about just strictly PvP content, which is pushing it a lot because there are two other Espers who are really good in PvP, which is Cang Ji and Everett, and they are only in B tier. But the reason why I'm giving him the A tier is because he is very, very good in PvP. Next up, we have Jin Yao. She is definitely more versatile than in the past. So right now, she's really good in many of the Sentinel Hunt bosses. She's really meta in PvP. She's really good in some, like maybe Apex, for example. And there are other content as well, like some of the Infinity Tower flaws she strives in because your team starts off with Silence, for example, then she gets rid of it instantly. Very nice. So in terms of general viability and versatility, I think she's definitely at A tier minimally. Next up, we have Lewis. He is only going to shine right now when he's at R6. Below R6, he's not going to be used all that much. So I think he's actually going to be rather niche, I would say, which is a big downgrade from the past where I actually put him up at a B tier, for example. Yeah, now he's at C tier. Okay, as for Liling, same thing. I don't think he's very viable below R6. I think R6 is probably where he starts to shine a lot. And same goes for Narmer as well. I think he's extremely niche until he's at R6. There are some Espers here who are really good at R6. Now, Ollie, R2, he has 2 turns of invincibility on his passive and I think 2 turns of regeneration, but who cares? So that is really good, especially so for Chronos if you want a super safe comp. That 2 turn of protection is amazing. Now, in terms of his content coverage, he's very good in PvP, he's also really good in PvE, in some PvE at least. So I'll say he's more of a PvP-centric Esper. So in terms of general viability, I am thinking between A tier and S tier. I think I would have to put him at S tier. Now, Ophelia has definitely fallen short in recent times, like she is less viable than before, surprisingly. Because right now, no one cares too much about holo battles, so it's not really a content that I'll say, oh, she's so good there, therefore you need to summon for her. I don't think so. But that's not to say that she don't shine in other content as well. She still shines in certain PvE content, like for example, Dark Starlord, Sonica, Fafnir sometimes, Point War maybe, but yeah, now we are touching PvP again. So anyway, all in all, I think she's still an A tier Esper. Now, as for Raven, she's really good at R0 because she not only strips, but she defense breaks as well. And at R2, she's able to cool down, reset the enemies when they don't have buffs. Let me show you. Oh, I forgot, I don't have a Raven. But the thing is, I don't think that really changes a lot for a kit because the whole point of you using Raven in PvP is just to strip buffs and defense break. Not so much about cooldown resetting on her second skill unless you have an Astro proc, for example, which is, why not you just use Nuxi, right? And in terms of PvE content, I know a lot of you guys are always going to challenge me on this, but I don't feel like she has a lot of value in PvE. I think most of her value comes in PvP, and I wouldn't for the life of me use her in PvE at all. Why would I do so? I have other defense breakers, like Zora for example, or maybe even Lin Xiao who does good damage. So I think in general viability, she is still very much a niche Esper in my opinion. Now, Sally at R2 is definitely not the same Sally at R6, very different. But that's not to say that she is bad, because she is still really good. So whenever your allies move, they get healed, they get cleansed as well, very powerful. So in terms of general usefulness, she is very good, and the best part is she's free, R0 free. Now, I do have her at R2, and what she benefits from at R2 is now her second skill can heal your allies as well, which is 15% of their max HP, which is okay. It's not like game breaking or anything like that, it's just a heal. So I feel like she is going to sit very nicely in S tier, I think about S tier or A tier, either low S or high A. Now we have Sienna, and to be honest, I need to check out what her R2 is. Oh, okay, extended 3 turns, very nice. This is either really good or really bad. So in Shadow Gale, this is obviously really bad because you need your cooldowns to be shortened, not to be increased. But it's still very good in most other content, and I feel like she is very, very powerful. You definitely need to max skill her, you definitely need to use her in every single content that you can. She is very strong right now, especially when she reaches R6, but that's a conversation for another day. But she's very, very potent, and she's like a high S tier in my opinion. Now next up we have Tang Xuan, and his R2 is actually pretty decent, I would say. I know some of you guys are going crazy about his R2. I personally don't feel like it's that broken because he don't proc all that much. 20% chance for him to pursue on his first skill is really not a lot. But there is the opportunity for him to deal a lot of extra DPS, which is completely free. And on top of that, because he triple hits on his first skill, he naturally already does quite a significant amount of damage, especially towards the end game. So he's very viable in like the Howling Pillar, for example, and in some point war or knockout defenses and offenses. Aside from those content, I don't find that there are any other meaningful reasons why you want to use him. So I am going to put him at B tier, but that is still an upgrade from a C tier. I mean, look, he's actually more viable than Liling right now in my opinion. Okay, next we have Tever, and I'm going to put him at A tier. Some of you guys are going to disagree. Some of you guys are going to say like, oh, Tever sucks and blah, 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 blah. But I have used him before, and at R2, he's actually a lot more improved. So at R2, the main difference is he is now useful against bosses. So you don't have to kill the enemy to trigger the effect, the Nico Curse. You can just double attack and the Nico Curse is going to pop instantly. So that makes him more viable in more content, right? So like for example, if you want to climb Temporal Tower, it's very easy for you to abuse him to deal AoE damage. And if you want to do PvP, for example, it's also very easy for you to manipulate him to deal good AoE damage as well, as like a follow-up DPS or something like that. So he's still very viable. I still feel that he has a lot of use. He's just completely undersold. The thing is, if you can understand why Embla is so good, you can also potentially understand why Tever is quite good as well. And Tever is a Shimmer type, come on, let's be honest. Now, Tia doesn't gain a lot from her R2, she gains a lot more from her R6. I think now just like her first skill applies to silence or something like that. So in terms of viability, she is okay in PvP. I don't think she's very good in PvE at all. There is very little reason why you want to use her in PvE. There are epic aspects that are more viable than she is. I think she's actually going to go in between B and C. I think she's like a low B, so I'll just put her at B tier. Now, Tricky is fantastic. He is so good. At R2, his third skill not only inflicts miss rate up, it also inflicts speed down, which is huge for his kit. It's very powerful. So not only is he able to strip buffs, he can apply 2 debuffs on all the enemies as well. And of course, his passive is really broken, not just in PvP, but in some PvE content where there are enemies who cleanse themselves. So he has a lot of usefulness in many different content. I think he is going to go into S+. Now next we have Unas. He's essentially the best battery in this game. And at R2, and I know you guys might be thinking like, I think for Shimmer Legendaries, I should be talking about R0 and not R2. I kind of agree as well. But at R2, he provides his entire team with an attack up buff, which is crazy because he has the highest speed in the game, he has the biggest AP push of 30%, and now he also has an attack buff, which is very, very insane. But even without his R2, even at R0, I still feel like he's an S+ Esper just because he takes so many turns, he lands defense breaks on his first skill, he has immunity on his second skill, which is a passive, and he has the biggest AP push in the game as well. A lot of good stuff jam-packed into this one Esper. His R2 is just a big plus on top of everything else. Now next up we have Yunchuan. This is going to be an easy S tier Esper. So he covers several content and he does them very, very well. But in terms of PvP, I don't think he really strives that hard unless he's at R6. If he's below R6 and he doesn't have the blocking effect, he might not carry a lot for your team. But of course, it really depends on how you want to build your team. And primarily, you need to build a team around him in order for him to work. But that also means that this team is very easy to be countered. But the big change for his R2 is now obviously whenever your allies attack an enemy with a third eye seal debuff, Yunchuan is able to assist afterwards, which is a very big change. Now Zora R2 is very, very strong. So she has a defense break right now on her third skill at R2. So she's pretty viable in like Desolate Lands, for example, like Shadow Fire. She's also really good in some Chronos teams. She's also really good in like some of your Sentinel Hunt bosses. And she's also used in Point War as a defense breaker in some teams. So I think she has some coverage. So I think she's gonna go into A tier in my opinion. Now next we have Elliot. He cooldown resets and he removes buffs on his third skill, but this is not the same R6 Elliot. And at R6 he's still okay, he's not like extremely broken. He's just an excellent counter against Cang Jie, that's all. So I think at R2 there's very little reason why you might want to use him. There are other espers like Li Ao for example, there is also Jin He. You can use both of those espers and they kind of do the same thing, although it's not quite the same as cooldown reset that he can do, but after all, he is just an Inferno type, he's not going to be good against flow type espers. But Li Ao on the other hand can control any esper in the game as long as they are not a height. Now next up for height, I am going to just put in an A tier. I don't really want to discuss too much about him. So he's really good in several content, but I wouldn't really use him in PvE content like some of you guys would, but because he is still viable as an early game esper in some PvE content just because he is very tanky, he can revive all that and still do good damage at the same time, I feel like okay, I'm not going to put him at B tier, I'm going to put him at A tier, which is an upgrade from the past because previously I put him at B tier and you guys went crazy about it. Now Leora, you guys already know where I'm going to put her, A tier, we have discussed this before. She is very viable in some content and she's very strong at those content as well. But it's mostly Chronos and Temporal Tower and some PvP as well. Now Lucas is going to be an S tier esper, this is very straightforward. He has a lot of control on his kit, he's very viable in a lot of PvE content just because of the AP control he has, the stuns, the buff stripping, a lot of stuff. Good in PvP as well, definitely S tier. Now, our last esper for today is going to be Yuuhime aka Izanami, and this is going to be a preliminary placement of her based on where I think she's good at, based on how good I think her kit is. Now in terms of DPS, I feel like she only strives a lot on her third skill, not her second, not her first skill. The rotation is kind of weird, her second skill multipliers are really shit. I don't think there's a lot going for her in her first two skills, and I mean her defense break only lasts for one turn, that kind of stuff. But her third skill is very powerful, so she strives quite hard in PvP as long as you can make her work, and that is by needing to have the perfect setup for her. Aside from PvP, which is mostly point walk and knockout, in terms of PvE content, I don't think she has a strong placement there as well. She is like good but not great. So all in all, I think Yuuhime, including her speed lead as well, I think she belongs to the A tier. I don't think she goes higher, I don't think she goes lower at all. I feel like she's an okay esper, not bad. Okay, but anyway, that's it for this tier list. Let me know your comments down in the comment section below. Do you agree or disagree with anything that I said? If there are anything that you want adjusted, do let me know as well, and I'll be very happy to understand why that is the case. So let me know exactly why you feel like some things you disagree with. Maybe give me more information aside from just saying, oh, I disagree with this, I disagree with that. But anyway, if you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to leave a thumbs up. It really helps the channel, and subscribe for more Dislyte content. Now with that said, this has been Dare Free to Play, and as always, I will see you in the next video.